A is for alright, alright, alright. It's time for another book talk video. Today, I am challenging myself to see how many of Jim's from Jim's books, reading and stuff, alphabet letter tags that I can get done in one video. It's really just going to come down to how long before I get tired. I want to thank Jim not just for making the videos, but for tagging me as well. It's been inspiring to watch people's videos. He has also created playlists. You can go to Jim's channel, go to the playlist tab, and he's got a playlist that's got responses for each alphabet letter tag, which I think is a lot of fun. That inspired me to create my own playlist because I've had 3 original or supposedly original tags that I've made. So now I've got playlists on my playlist tag. Go to my YouTube, click on playlist, and you can see those 3 right there with all the responses that I have found from people. If I missed yours, let me know and I'll add it to it. I've had so much fun with these tags. In addition to being tagged by Jim for the letter A and the letter F, I've also been tagged by Dane Cobain, who is another awesome YouTuber. He's a writer, so he's really AuthorTube and Booktube. And that was for the letter D. And Margaret Pinard recently tagged me for the letter M. I don't know if I'll get all the way to the letter M, but I figured I'd mention it here as we're getting going. Jim has been really clear on his channel that when it comes to these tags, you don't have to answer every question. In fact, he encourages you to just pick and choose, to delete the ones that you don't know an answer to or you'd prefer not to answer, and he's encouraging people to create their own. So what I did was I went through the letters and I narrowed it down to my top 5 prompts for each one that I would like to answer, and then I added a prompt of my own for each letter. So here we go, the letter A tag. A is for America. What do you consider the great American novel? I could make an entire video series about this. I'm gonna go with the standard classic answer, which I know upsets some people now. Some people verbally speak out against this answer, but it really is my answer. The Great Gatsby is the great American novel. It's got the word great in the title, which helps make that mental connection. But really, it's about the American dream. It's about hope, which I hope people still feel with the American dream, though it shows the disillusionment with the American dream. It shows that in order for someone to advance in society like Gatsby did, they might have to reinvent themselves. They might end up getting involved in crimes in order to get the kind of money that it takes to join the elite. It shows the dangerous wealthy people at the top with Daisy and Tom. Tom is such a bad person. He's racist, he's sexist, and you understand that as a reader. He is embodying the worst of that kind of stereotype of a person. Daisy is a beautiful trickster. Daisy, Fae, Daisy being a flower, Fae being trickster creatures. It's right there in her name, the name illusion. I could go on and on and on, especially about Nick Carraway and his detachment, trying not to judge people, but getting involved in all the affairs and potentially the criminal activities. I recommend it as the great American novel. Sometimes you have to read it more than once to really appreciate it. And you might just watch the film with Tobey Maguire and Leonardo DiCaprio. It does a nice job getting those themes across. Themes that about 100 years later, I think are still relevant. A is for arc. Which character in literature has the most interesting character arc? I'm gonna go with my favorite character of all time, Mr. Elim Garak from Star Trek Deep Space Nine. There's a brilliant novel that the actor who portrayed the character on the show wrote himself, Andrew Robinson. It's called A Stitch in Time. It deals with the character's backstory, his origins, how he was raised to be a spy, an assassin, and how he really had a lot of daddy issues, family issues growing up, and how he, in order to try to do what was best for his society, was exiled by his own people and then had to survive living with foreigners and aliens, and in doing so, ultimately watch his whole world be ravaged and destroyed by aliens that had betrayed his people. He fought so hard to make the world a better place, and then in the end, he has to help rebuild the world. He has to try and make the world better after all of that. So in his novel, you get the origin story, you get the after effects, but you get a lot of the destruction of the world on the TV show Star Trek Deep Space Nine. Character was technically a guest star side character on the show, but they kept having him come back. And once they went into their big war arcs, the last few seasons, he was in a lot of the TV episodes. Really fascinating character. A is for Australia. What was the last book you read by an Australian author? I believe it was Cam Wolfe's book, Welcome Descent. A delightful horror thriller novel. I say delightful. It's fun to read, but the main character's going through a lot with it. I recommend the book if you haven't checked it out yet. A is for autobiography. What was the last autobiography that you read? I did not look this up to be 100% sure, but I remember for Nonfiction November last year, I was reading things like Agatha Christie's autobiography, and maybe the last one was If Chins Could Kill, Bruce Campbell, the actor's memoir. I consider memoir and autobiography to be in the same category. A is for audiobooks. Do you consider listening to an audiobook as reading? I really wish that this debate would just go away. Of course, listening to an audiobook is reading. Your brain is taking in the story, you are thinking about the characters and ideas. It's just another input device. Instead of using your eyes, you're using your ears to get the information into your head, but your brain is doing the same thing, processing the information. If you think about yourself like a computer, or a robot, it should be very easy to just delete this question from future tags. And then my addition to the A tag, A is for Athos and Aramis. Who is your favorite musketeer? I'm going to go with Aramis. I used to always say Athos because I really liked that he was secretly romantic, even though he came across as dark and kind of mean. But Aramis is a fascinating character because he is deeply religious and he wants to be a priest. But similarly to how I was talking about Mr. Garrick, he finds that the best way to serve his country and serve the people is to be a musketeer as he is journeying through life. Alright, let's go to the letter B, the B tag. B is for Bildungsroman. Do you have a favorite Bildungsroman or coming-of-age story? When I was in graduate school, they told me that the Bildungsroman was not just coming-of-age, but also about a character who wanders from place to place. So my answer to this is Moll Flanders. She grows up with poverty in the streets, being a woman who has to deal with all the sexism. She ends up marrying several people in the story. She commits a lot of crimes. She's a fascinating rogue character, and she goes from place to place as life deals her different situations. B is for bookshop or bookstore. Do you have a favorite bookstore? I do, and I long to return there, but it's a little bit of a drive. I live in the Dallas-Fort Worth area in Texas, and there's a city called Denton that's not that far away, but I'd have to drive about 45 minutes probably to be able to get there and get into the city and park for this bookstore. But it's called Recycled Books. It's an old opera house. I've mentioned it on my channel before. One of the fun elements of it is it's like a maze. When you first go in, there are some big open areas, but then you go around some corners and down some stairs, and you just keep finding more little rooms and closets full of books, and you never know what you're going to find there. B is for banned books. Is there any book you think should be banned? Oh, that's a tough one. I mean, ultimately, people can censor themselves. I think reading controversial books still gives us insight. It helps us understand what those people are thinking. So I'm not trying to ban any books myself. B is for Bible. What's your favorite book of the Bible, and what trigger warnings do you think it should have? Off the top of my head, I'm a big fan of the story of King Solomon, where there's a judgment that he has to make as two women come forth claiming to both be the mother of a baby. He has to decide who gets to keep the baby. I think it's a really nice story. B is for Brazil. Paulo Coelho's The Alchemist, I probably butchered that name, I apologize, has been translated into 70 languages. Have you read any of his books? I have. I've read The Alchemist. I thought it was alright. You know, I've had students who've read it. They found it inspiring, so I like it. And then my addition to the B tag, B is for Bilbo Baggins. Who is your favorite thief character? There are so many great thieves in literature. Wonderful rogues. You know, I've got that 15 rogues tag just for fun right now because it is so hard to pick. I'm going to go with Catwoman from the Batman graphic novels and comics. Catwoman's actually a very complex character. The fact that sometimes she helps Batman, but sometimes she's a villain, makes her a very gray, kind of ambiguous character. Now for the letter C. C is for Canine and Cat. As you know, if you watch my channel, I have two cats, Daxter and Jack, the Panther brothers, so you can see them on the screen. C is for classic. What is the last classic book you read? I am currently reading The Last Cavalier Cavalier by Alexander Dumas. That's the American title. It has a different title in French. It's not really a classic, I suppose, because it was recently found, but it is a classic. It just, an editor had to pull out all the stories from the newspapers because it was serialized and then look through Alexander Dumas' notes to finish the ending, because unfortunately Alexander Dumas passed away before the ending was fully written and published. C is for children's book. What was the last children's book you read for your own enjoyment? I read The Prince, that really interesting philosophical text that deals with the soldier. It is technically a children's book. I read that at some point in 2020, I believe. I don't read a lot of children's books these days. C is for comedy. What is the funniest book you have read? I'm gonna go with Tina Fey's book, Bossy Pants. She's really funny in that one. C is for comic books. Can you explain to me the attraction of these? Oh, Jim, if you're not reading graphic novels and comic books, they are exciting. You don't have to deal with the narration. You don't have to deal with having actions described to you. You get to see them with your eyes, which is a lot of fun. You just get dialogue and visuals. I highly recommend it, especially if you're able to get a hold of text by Alan Moore, things like V for Vendetta and The Watchmen. And then I added onto the prompt, C is for the Count of Monte Cristo. How do you feel about revenge stories? I really like a good revenge story. As a reader, there is a mix of understanding that revenge and violence and murder are bad things, but there's a character who has been wronged by bad people, and eventually, in a lot of these stories, the character learns the lesson that the murder and the killing and the getting revenge really was not the best thing to do, and that there were potentially other ways to move on and deal with things in life. A lot of times bad things happen to those characters as a result of their revenge. Take V for Vendetta or the Count of Monte Cristo as examples. The letter D. D is for Doctor Who. Who's your favorite Doctor from Doctor Who? They say that a lot of people are biased. Whichever Doctor they see first is their favorite. And that's true for me. Before I started watching the series, I had a friend show me the Library of the Dead two-parter with David Tennant. And David Tennant is my favorite Doctor, unless you consider Dr. Donna. But I don't think Jim meant that by the question. Dr. Donna is amazing. D is for Dickens. How many Dickens novels have you read? He had 15. I've read Great Expectations, I've read A Christmas Carol, and I believe I've read one more. So I didn't go to double check on Goodreads, but I would guess 3. D is for dictionary. In the internet years, do you still use physical paper dictionaries? Yes, I do. Just today, I grabbed a dictionary in my classroom and was looking up some words. But you know, I'm a poet, I'm a writer, and I love words. So I think it's a lot of fun to visually go through the dictionary and see what other words have similar sounds, or what words I can use, create a sense of rhythm and flow or rhyme. Also, I think it helps students to have physical dictionaries in the classroom. Maybe spread them around, put them out on desks, encourage them to think about words. D is for dagger and detective. What was the last detective novel you read? Oh, that's a really good question. I love detective characters. I guess I should have prepared for the D prompt a little bit better, because off the top of my head, I'm not sure. But I'll put something up on the screen, I'm sure, because I'll look on Goodreads while I'm editing. D is for Dostoevsky. What is your favorite Dostoevsky novel? I'm gonna go with a novella, which is The Gambler. Some people call it a short story, but it dealt with really and truly the power of addiction that comes with gambling, and it's a bit shocking. And then I added on to the prompt, D is for duck. Who is your favorite character that is a duck? There's so many great ones out there, not just Donald and Daffy for their goofy stuff, but of course Scrooge McDuck, Huey, Dewey, and Louie and Abigail from DuckTales, and then the spin-off, you've got Darkwing Duck and Gizmo Duck, but probably the greatest duck of all is Howard the Duck, who is featured in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, just briefly, just barely. The letter E tag, I'm gonna tell you, I probably will just stop here. I'll do A through E, because this is starting to be a lot, I'm realizing, and I got a lot of work to do. So I'll do more letters in the future. But here's the letter E. E is for elephant. What is the biggest book you have read this year? Oh gosh, those Brandon Sanderson novels, they are huge. They're 1,200 or more pages. E is for Elantra. Speaking of Brandon Sanderson, what is your favorite book or series by Brandon Sanderson? This may upset some Brandon Sanderson fans, and I don't mean to do that, but the huge, epic novels that are 1,200, 1,300 pages long, it has so many characters, so much going on. Sometimes it hurts my brain, and I actually prefer his shorter works. And between a couple of the novels in the Stormlight Archive, he's got these really fascinating side stories that he does as novellas, and I really liked the last one that he did. I believe it was called Dawn Shard. But the idea of Brandon Sanderson taking his writing and focusing on less characters on a specific quest or mission, to me, was perfect. Much better than trying to unravel all the mysteries and occurrences and characters in the larger work. E is for experimental. Have you read any experimental books? I have. I absolutely love The House of Leaves, and I'm always happy to recommend it to people. We are approaching September and October. Halloween is coming up, so I would recommend House of Leaves as a September-October read. It's so different from anything else you're going to read. I purchased a copy of The Ship of Theseus, but I haven't read it. It is even more experimental than that. E is for elf. What is your favorite fantasy creature? There are so many great fantasy creatures, but I'm going to go with the Phoenix. The Phoenix is featured in those Harry Potter novels. You've got Fawkes, who I assume was named after Guy Fawkes, but I don't know. E is for extraterrestrial. What is your favorite book about another world or your favorite planet, real or fictitious? I'm going to nerd out about D&D just briefly here, but Gary Gygax and his friend Robert J. Kuntz and all of the crowd around the original D&D played in the setting of Oerth. Robert J. Kuntz had his own setting called Calabrune, which was another world that the characters could travel back and forth to. So it would probably be Oerth and or What I Know About Calabrune from RJK. And then I added on to the E tag. E is for epic. What are your thoughts about epic fantasy and sci-fi? Which I already started to go into with the Brandon Sanderson question. As much as I love those epic stories and epic series, I have to admit, just honestly, sometimes it's overwhelming. You read something like Dune, you're going to have to read Dune 2 or 3 times to really figure out what's going on with the Bene Gesserit, with the different political factions, and all the characters, because there's so much happening. But it is great literature. It's just there's a lot to figure out. There's a huge learning curve with the world building, but I do like it. Similarly, Brandon Sanderson's stories, lots of characters. You read the first book, you're still just trying to figure out who these people are, which is why a lot of fans of an epic series will tell you they reread. Maybe when each new book comes out, they go back and reread previous stuff, or if you're like me, I get the audiobook and listen to the previous stuff to try and remember, or you go online to fan websites and read summaries. But I'm going to be honest, epic fantasy and sci-fi can be overwhelming, can be a lot to deal with, and that's why I understand a lot of people don't read it. A lot of people don't really get into it. Alright, it looks like the alphabet has defeated me for now. I'll do more letters in the future, I guess in the coming months, as I have opportunities on Tuesdays or Wednesdays to get them done. That's it for today's book talk. I hope you enjoyed it. It's an open tag from me. If you are listening to this video, I tag you for the letter A, the letter B, the letter C, the letter D, and the letter E. They're all fun. As I said at the beginning of the video, go to Jim's channel, get all the prompts from his videos, because YouTube limits the text in the description. I can't post everything here. I'll just post my questions that I've added with the links to the people who tagged me. But alright, the outro will now be finished. Every day is a good day for book talk. Peace.